It all begins on a devastated battlefield, covered with the bodies of fallen warriors during a storm. A gravely wounded warrior grips his bloodied sword tightly amidst the carnage. The leader of the demonic cult emerges with a sadistic grin, enveloped in a dark energy. He begins to mock the emperor with the sword, calling the whole tragedy something amusing. The wounded warrior breathes with great difficulty as he faces his fearsome enemy. This is Young Shin, who, even without one arm and covered in blood, refuses to back down. He becomes enraged upon hearing the mockery and questions the villain with great indignation. Then he remembers when one of his disciples warned that the service was progressing. At that moment, he reflected on the immense responsibility that a true hero carried. He wondered if his men truly possessed the necessary determination to fight. But all the disciples in front of the palace showed that they were ready for battle. They promised to stand by his side until the end, and he was proud to have taught each one of them. Remembering this, the warrior grips the hilt of his sword with all the strength he has left. With a look full of fury, he decides that now it's his turn to attack the evil leader. He remembers how his men marched bravely without showing any hesitation. They gave their lives to fulfill the path of martial arts they chose to follow. Back in the present, he stomps firmly on the ground, cracking the stones as he advances with determination. Young Shin confronts the villain, determined to honor justice and the sacrifice of his disciple. He yells, asking how a bastard like that dares to find that tragedy amusing. The cult leader simply continues laughing in a chilling and confident manner, certain of his victory. The warrior realizes his hands are trembling, and he barely has the strength to hold the weapon. Even so, he concentrates and assumes his final fighting stance with his blade raised. The enemy continues to mock his strength and asks if he can bear the consequences. Young Shin replies that there is nothing he cannot endure as long as he has his sword. The villain clasps his bloodied hands together and questions whether he thinks the sky will remain the same. In an instant, the warrior advances at high speed against the fearsome adversary. He delivers a powerful blow, his sword gleaming intensely as it moves toward the throne. The attack hits its target with extreme violence, splattering blood into the air. The cult leader is hit squarely and begins to bleed profusely as he is defeated. Young Shin observes the damage intently to ensure that the enemy truly falls. But the villain lets out a bizarre laugh and utters mysterious words about the sun and the moon. Suddenly, a chaotic purple energy begins to accumulate around the opponent's body. The monster reveals a terrifying transformation, saying they will never be separated. A gigantic explosion of purple energy consumes the entire area in an overwhelming way. The blinding light spreads, destroying everything around it with impressive force. The impact is so devastating that it shakes even the trees of the most distant mountains. Young Shin groans in pain and plants his sword in the ground to help himself to his feet. He realizes that the enemy used a self-destruction technique to bring them both down together. Looking to the side, he sees only smoke and the lifeless bodies of his companion. The warrior tries to walk, but his steps are slow and leave a trail of blood. Completely exhausted, he loses his balance and falls to his knees on the stone floor. He feels his title of Emperor of the Sword is useless because he can't save anyone. Deeply grieving, he coughs up blood and silently apologizes to his disciple. The warrior raises his teary eyes, an expression of pure sadness and suffering. His vision begins to blur as he stares at the vast expanse that opens up above him. He reflects on how that sky represents the justice he so desperately wanted to protect. But he feels unworthy to look at the blue sky because he failed to keep his men alive. Spitting up more blood, he bitterly regrets not having been strong enough. He wonders if he could have gazed at the sky alongside them had he fought harder. On the brink of death, he wonders if all that remains on his blade is regret. Suddenly, the protagonist hears someone shout an unknown name and wakes up startled in a strange place. Before he even understands what's happening, he is struck by a violent kick that throws him to the ground. He lies lying on the dirt floor, completely confused, not knowing where he is or who attacked him like that. A bearded, furious man starts yelling at him, calling him lazy for still sleeping. The young man looked around, frightened, unable to understand how he had ended up in that strange situation. But the attacker doesn't allow time for explanations and delivers another violent blow to the fallen boy. The man shouts, saying that he rescued the orphan from suffering and that he should be much more grateful. While trying to defend himself from the attacks, the young man clearly remembers that he had already died in battle. He realizes that this is not a dream and perfectly remembers his disciples and the final battle he had. He is absolutely certain that he is the powerful Nam Young Shin, and that all those memories are real. This leads him to wonder if his strong desire to live has ultimately defied the laws of heaven itself. The bearded man tries to kick the boy again, but is met with a cold, deafening look. With impressive reflexes, the young man catches the attacker's foot in midair, demonstrating incredible strength. The brute lets out a groan of pain and is completely paralyzed as his blow is blocked so easily. He wonders where he gets so much strength, since that boy was crying in pain the day before. The protagonist slowly rises, emanating a dark and frightening aura that changes the entire atmosphere. His eyes now gleam with an unrelenting determination capable of intimidating any opponent. The aggressor loses all his arrogance and becomes completely terrified in the face of that overwhelming presence. The man loses his balance and falls backward to the ground, trembling with terror as he tries to get away from the young man. Young Shin approaches slowly with an imposing presence that makes the enemy seem insignificant. He grabs a sheathed sword that was nearby, preparing to teach the aggressor a lesson. His cold, judgmental gaze makes it clear that he will show no mercy to that cow. He believes that someone who mistreats a defenseless child who doesn't even know how to fight is not worthy of using a weapon. Other warriors watching the scene begin to mock the bearded man for being overpowered by a boy. They continue laughing and point out that the young man has severed meridians, which makes it all the more embarrassing. Humiliated in front of everyone, the aggressor grinds his teeth in pure rage and tries to regain his honor. He stands up shouting furiously and asks if the boy has gone mad because of his weak condition. The brute charges forward to attack again in a desperate attempt to crush the boy. With complete calm and precision, the protagonist begins to smoothly draw the blade from its sheath. In the blink of an eye, a precise cut strikes the opponent's arm, who doesn't even see the movement. The spectators, who had previously mocked the situation, were left speechless and without reaction at such speed. No one can believe that a mere sword assistant was capable of performing such a perfect technique. The man falls to his knees, screaming in pain while clutching his wounded arm, which is bleeding profusely. The young man looks at the fallen attacker and coldly orders him to raise his head and face him. The brute obeys, trembling, and cowers on the ground before that order, which is impossible to ignore. Tears of pure despair stream down the man's face as he realizes he is completely trapped. Looking at the boy, he sees the imposing silhouette of a legendary warrior from the past behind him. At that moment, he realizes with utter horror that the boy before him is no longer the weak Moon. He notices that all that timid and pathetic demeanor has disappeared, giving way to a completely different person. Meanwhile, in another mysterious place, a group of masked warriors gathers under a dark sky. The leader of that sect orders that their top priority is to find the young man with severed meridian. With a macabre smile on his face, he orders his subordinates to kill anyone who crosses their path. All the masked warriors shout in agreement with the cruel order of their feared master. Back in the village, the defeated assailant remains on his knees, weeping and begging for his life. The protagonist simply stares down at him with a piercing gaze and a chilling coldness. The man is terrified, thinking that the boy is really going to take his life right there. He bows down, resting his forehead on the ground, and desperately begs forgiveness for everything he has done. He quickly reached into his clothes to grab something that might save his skin. He throws a bag of coins on the ground, saying it's all he has, and begs for forgiveness once more. The reincarnated warrior gazes down at the cowardly man, maintaining his firm posture under the blue sky. The young man rejects the apology and asks if the coward really thought he would forget the past. He recalls spending 5 years suffering from a lack of clothes and food, as well as being beaten for no reason. The young man recounts being constantly robbed and humiliated, even when he was sick and too weak to fight back. While the crowd watches the scene unfolds, a mysterious figure dressed in black and wearing a large hat observes everything from afar. The mysterious person intently observes the young man's movements and seems very interested in what they are seeing. The boy claims that although he is in a different body, the memory of all that suffering is still alive within him. He questions what good is a false apology, even if the man offers gold coins to apologize. The young man warns that he can see the falseness in the attacker's face, even with his head pressed against the ground. The brute sweats from the cold and trembles with fear when he realizes that the young man won't fall for his smooth talk. The warrior raises his sword firmly above the head of the man who continues to plead for mercy. He delivers a swift blow, merely to startle the aggressor and cut through his arrogance once and for all. He says that anyone who lacks responsibility regarding martial arts has no right to wield a sword. Upon hearing those solemn words, the masked figure's eyes widened in utter surprise from behind the veil. She recognizes that phrase as one of the main slogans of her own sect and wonders how the boy knows her. Young Shin sheathes his blade and begins to walk away, leaving the defeated bully behind. The young man gazes thoughtfully at the blue sky, considering his new destiny and the direction his life should now take. He wonders what he should do from now on, since he has no acquaintances or allies nearby. Suddenly, a terrible scream echoes through the village, causing the warrior to turn quickly to look. He sees a resident running desperately down the dirt road trying to escape imminent danger. The man screams for help with an expression of pure panic as he tries to escape his pursuers. Then a warrior in a white mask suddenly appears and mercilessly slaughters the poor fugitive. Upon witnessing that terrible injustice, the protagonist clenches his teeth, feeling an immense wave of fury. People around them panic completely and start running in all directions trying to save themselves. The young man immediately recognizes those cruel invaders as members of the terrible demonic sect. He focuses his eyes on the symbol embroidered on their clothes, which depicts a black sun with a red moon. He confirms with absolute certainty that the mark does indeed belong to the terrible cult he so vehemently opposed. He also senses the sinister and malevolent energy emanating from the weapons and bodies of those wicked creatures. The hero is confused, unable to understand how those monsters are still alive if he sacrificed everything to destroy them. Meanwhile, the invaders begin to surround the place, attacking the defenseless residents with extreme cruelty. Hearing his enemies searching for someone with severed meridians, the boy realizes that he himself is their target. He grips the sword hilt angrily, noticing that those monsters continue to kill innocent people. The warrior decides that he cannot simply stand by and watch that cowardice without doing absolutely anything. He knows very well that those merciless demons bring only destruction wherever they go. With the firm belief that they should not exist in this world, he runs towards the fight. The other boys try to stop him, shouting that he will die if he faces those strong warriors. The boy pauses for a brief moment and replies with his back turned that once you hold a sword in your hand, one needs the wisdom and courage to know the exact moment to draw it and fight. His teammates stand frozen, staring at him with a mixture of admiration and deep concern. Meanwhile, the assassins from the demonic cult continue to advance rapidly through the village streets. The protagonist acknowledges that his current body is weak and lacks internal energy, but his determination remains unwavering. He focuses all his mental strength and ensures that his true path in martial arts has not changed at all. He raises the blade towards the sky, remembering with pride that in his past life, he was the emperor of the sword. The mysterious woman in the hat continues to observe the unusual behavior of that young warrior from afar. She is shocked to recognize the stance of the famous three-force technique coming from a boy who has never trained. A luminous and impressive energy begins to concentrate around the young man as he prepares. The observer notes that the boy's level of concentration is so absurdly high that he seems to ignore everything around him. The warrior takes a deep breath and focuses his sharp vision on the swift movements of all the opponents before him. He precisely calculates the exact position of each enemy to plan his deadly attack. With his sword fully raised, he concentrates the rest of his strength to deliver a precise blow. The young man leaps toward his first opponent, initiating the combat that will decide the fate of that village. He murmurs the word, "Heaven," mentally initiating the first part of his legendary combat technique. Then the warrior stomps hard on the ground, propelling his weak body with incredible speed. He unleashes a downward vertical slash that cuts through the air with extreme speed and fatality. The first enemy collapses unconscious to the ground before he can even react to the surprise attack. The other members of the cult recover from the shock and move forward together to try to surround the young man. But with incredibly fluid movements, the boy manages to dodge the blows with extreme ease. He smiles slightly and says the word "Earth," preparing the second stage of his defense technique. He spins his blade in a low, sweeping motion, blocking and disarming opponents around him. One of the assassins leaps from a height with his sharp sword, attempting to strike the protagonist from above. With perfect reflexes, the boy raises his makeshift shield and deflects the attack with absolute mastery. The warrior speaks the word "man," completing the trinity of combat techniques he has mastered so well. He executes a precise thrust that cuts through the opponent's defense with perfect speed and precision. The young man maintains his firm and imposing posture, showing that his masterful mind remains impeccable. The opponent lets out a groan of pain upon realizing he has been completely outmatched by the boy. The assassin falls to his knees, utterly defeated, while the protagonist watches him with great seriousness. The wounded man stammers in fear that the young man is actually a true monster in combat. The hero looks away disdainfully, believing those weak henchmen are no match for his skills. The enemy finally collapses on the dirt ground, sealing the boy's impressive victory. He takes advantage of the opening to defeat the last invaders of that group with quick and clean blows. The woman in the hat is speechless when she realizes he only used the basic three-force technique to win. She recognizes inwardly that the boy possesses a natural and brilliant talent for the way of the sword. Suddenly, the protagonist senses something strange and looks up, suspicious of a new threat. He spots a group of new masked enemies watching everything from the rooftop of a nearby house. The young man prepares for another fight, wondering if there are still many opponents left in that village. The leader of the group on the roof is surprised to see that the entire first unit was defeated so easily. The protagonist tries to raise his weapon but feels his body suddenly fail him at the worst possible moment. He lets out a groan of pain as he feels a terrible, suffocating tightness in his chest, unexpected. Completely exhausted, he falls to his knees on the ground, supporting himself on his own sword to avoid fainting. He remembers that the body is suffering from disrupted meridians and is experiencing a severe pain crisis. The young man tries to resist the terrible seizure, wondering if those symptoms are what he imagines. The enemies on the roof watch the boy's suffering and realize he is completely defenseless. The leader deduces that he is the boy they are looking for, with the broken meridians identical to those in the search pamphlet. With a cruel look, he immediately orders his subordinates to capture the boy without harming him. Several assassins jump from the roof simultaneously, ready to immobilize the fallen protagonist. Even while suffering from unbearable pain, the young man tries to hold his weapon tightly in an attempt to defend himself. Suddenly, a powerful blue lightning bolt cuts across the sky and strikes the ground, driving away all the attackers. The protagonist's eyes widen in confusion as he watches that impressive blue electricity appear out of nowhere. He looks up and spots an imposing figure on the roof, controlling that powerful energy. She is the mysterious woman in the black hat who now manipulates blue lightning bolts around her sharp sword. The cult leader recognizes her immediately and realizes that his rival faction has discovered their plans there. One of the henchmen is thrown far away by the enormous force of the shockwave caused by the lightning strike. The warrior stands high above, facing her enemies with complete confidence and without showing fear. The leader orders them to focus on the main mission and tells his men to buy time while he tries to escape. The remaining henchmen leap at the woman in a desperate attempt to stop her at all costs. With great elegance, she unsheathes her gleaming sword, which shines with a strong, magical blue energy. His eyes gleam intensely as the power of the lightning builds up for a devastating attack. She unleashes a powerful circular strike, releasing electrical discharges that send opponents flying. The warrior leaps from the roof with extreme agility, landing gracefully in the midst of the battle. She lands on the ground with ease, maintaining full focus on the enemies who are still trying to resist. The protagonist watches this incredible display of power with wide, surprised eyes. The warrior with the hat continues striking her enemies with electricity, causing them to be easily defeated. The protagonist watches everything in astonishment as he recognizes the legendary infinite step technique being used before him. He is very confused, not understanding how that unknown woman masters the footwork of his former sect. At that moment, the leader of the assassins suddenly appears right behind the tired young man, taking advantage of his vulnerability. The villain reaches out to capture him, coldly warning that he'll have to go with him anyway. The boy tries to dodge the attack but becomes frustrated when he realizes his weak body can't react in time. But the mysterious warrior reacts instantly, advancing towards them with lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, she delivers a precise blow that tears off the enemy leader's outstretched arm in a trail of blood. The cult leader screams in pain and astonishment, utterly shocked by the relentless speed of that counterattack. The woman in the hat stands in front of the young man, wielding her gleaming blade with impeccable elegance. She orders the villain to take his dirty hands off him and confesses with a smile that she ended up liking the boy quite a lot. Even with the threat gone, the protagonist continues to tremble violently as his consciousness begins to fail. His vision becomes completely blurred and he can barely stand due to the extreme effort he made in the fight. The warrior is startled to see the young man lose his strength and collapse unconscious towards the ground. He faints in her arms, not knowing what will happen to him now that he is completely vulnerable. His mind goes completely blank, and everything around the young hero plunges into a deep darkness. After some time, the protagonist slowly begins to open his eyes, trying to regain his senses. He sits up startled from the bed with a groan of pain as he realizes he is lying in a cozy room. The mysterious woman sitting next to him asks amicably if he has finally woken up. She manages a warm smile behind her thin veil, relieved to see that the young man has regained consciousness. The young man silently observes the place, noticing that he is in a very well-decorated room, safe from intruders. He reflects on the incredible stepping technique she used, confirming that it wasn't the style of his former palette. The warrior explains that she managed to calm the dangerous cold energy that was blocking his meridian. The boy becomes thoughtful because he knows that this rare condition of energy blockage usually only happens in women. He is amazed that someone could contain that freezing force so quickly, and from her voice he deduces that she is very young, but possesses a simply fantastic level of control over martial energy. At that point, the woman apologizes for her lack of manners and decides it's time to reveal herself properly to him. She reaches for her large straw hat and slowly begins to remove it, revealing her long, dark hair. She undid her combat hairstyle, letting her hair fall softly over her shoulder. The girl reveals her extremely beautiful and delicate face with a friendly expression that reassures the boy. She introduces herself as Lee Se-ha from the Blue Sky sect and invites him to join her from now on. Se-ha offers to make him his disciple, to teach him how to fight and try to cure his rare physical condition once and for all. She says she was impressed by the clean marks on his sword and by his courage in facing his enemy. The boy is curious about the proposed cure since he has never heard of anyone who has overcome that deadly block. The young woman smiles confidently and says that the secret to achieving that miracle lies in her own power. She demonstrates her strength by concentrating a brilliant stream of blue rays at the tips of her delicate fingers. Se-ha explains that he has mastered a celestial heat art that can be taught to open his meridians one by one. The protagonist mentally agrees, knowing that the condition wouldn't be cured with just ordinary heat art. He knows that the uncontrolled accumulation of opposing forces in the body often causes a premature and painful death. But the young woman goes on to say that his masculine energy combined with special elixirs makes healing possible. He concludes that this art of lightning is a very high-level technique that is well worth learning. If he manages to master this power, he will have a strong enough foundation to overcome the limitations of his past life. However, the hero knows he needs to understand the true reason behind all that sudden generosity. He asks her directly why she wants to take on as a disciple a mere assistant she has just met. The young woman let out a soft laugh, finding amusing that such mature distrust coming from such a young boy. She then repeats the phrase he said about how those who don't take responsibility shouldn't have a sword. Se-ha explains that he only wishes to train someone who wields their weapon justly and possesses a virtuous heart. The protagonist gazes at the girl in silence, deeply absorbing the sincere words he has just heard. He clenches his fist thoughtfully, reflecting on what it means to have a truly virtuous heart. Finally, he looks at her defiantly and asks what would happen if he decided to refuse her proposal. Se-ha warns that he will continue to be targeted by the demonic cult and suggests that he stay in a safe house or live in hiding. He becomes suspicious and asks why they would go to so much trouble instead of simply eliminating it to avoid problems. The young woman replies that if they did that, they would be like demons, and that their duty is to protect whomever they can. She acknowledges that many sacrifice the weak for the greater good, and that most prefer to focus only on the big things. With a beautiful smile, she says she wants to be the person who welcomes and protects the little things left behind. The protagonist stares at her, deeply moved by such a noble and genuine statement about protecting the weak. He smiles discreetly, realizing that this virtuous woman is more than worthy of becoming his new teacher. Without hesitation, the young man bows before her in a solemn gesture of respect that leaves her completely surprised. He asks for forgiveness for having doubted her pure intentions and for having been so suspicious of her generosity. Se-ha smiles, finding his attitude amusing, and asks if he has finally made a decision about her invitation. The young man smiles and confirms with conviction that he has decided to accept the proposal and that he will follow it from now on. The warrior rejoices, saying he made the right choice, and calls him by his old name, Mumyong. She then asks if he has another name, since Mumyong seems too simple for such a talented boy. He remembers with disdain that name given by the cowardly aggressor who mistreated him so much in the past. The young woman explains that to throw off the trackers of the demonic cult, he will need to adopt a new identity. He reflects that to honor his former palace and his fallen disciples, his new surname will be Namgung. He chooses the name Jun to symbolize that this time he will finish what he couldn't complete in his past life. To the boy's complete surprise, the teacher herself spontaneously suggests the exact name Namgung Jun. Stunned by the incredible coincidence, the hero immediately accepts, saying he will use that name from now on. The young woman repeats the name aloud, savoring the words to see how her disciple's new identity sounds. She breaks into a beautiful, satisfied smile and comments that she found the choice of name really very good and impressive. The boy quickly gets out of bed and formally kneels on the floor to pay the traditional respect. He stands with a firm posture and solemnly declares that his new disciple, Namgung Jun, is ready. The young man performs a full bow, touching his head to the ground to officially greet his new teacher. Seha watches him with a look full of tenderness and immense pride, overjoyed with the new bond they have created. The protagonist maintains a solemn bow in complete silence, sealing the oath of loyalty between the two. She accepts the compliments, calling him her disciple, but warns that the next step will be somewhat sudden. With a huge smile on her face, she announces that they are going to start martial arts training right then and there. The boy is completely paralyzed and speechless, letting out only a murmur of astonishment at her haste. Time passes and night begins to slowly fall over the beautiful temple hidden amidst the verdant mountains. An old book is placed on the table while the teacher explains that the foundation of everything begins with mental formula. She asks if he is ready to begin studying the sacred scriptures of the art of celestial lightning. As twilight paints the sky in shades of pink, the two become completely focused on the secret teaching. Pointing enthusiastically to the manual, she proudly presents the secret technique of true thunder. The boy scratches his head in confusion as she tries to understand the exact pronunciation of his unusual last name. She flips through the book and says that since he was a sword assistant, he must know how to read, but promises to explain every detail. The protagonist respectfully agrees, demonstrating complete attention to his new teacher's initial instructions. He observes that the young teacher is a formidable genius who reached her peak very early and will be crucial against the cult. He notices that her talent compares to his in the past as she asks him what he understands about the formula. The boy analyzes the symbols and explains that the energy must be forced to circulate forcefully through the pressure point. She is amazed by his intelligence, praising his quick comprehension and ability to absorb everything in an instant. The warrior feels as if she is conversing with an equal, or even someone wiser than herself. The entire night passes in an instant, and the first rays of morning sun begin to emerge from behind the mountain. Noticing the sunrise through the window, the young woman asks in surprise if he isn't tired from studying all night. The young man stands up determinedly and announces that he has already memorized the entire formula and wants to begin meditating immediately. Seha becomes a little thoughtful and warns that feeling the energy flow on the first try is almost impossible. He sits cross-legged on the floor while she promises to protect him from any danger during cultivation. As the young man begins to meditate, an intense torrent of colored energy begins to float around his body. With just a single deep breath, the boy feels his new body react in an extraordinary way. He exhales slowly, incredibly surprised to already feel the internal energy flowing through his meridian. He realizes that the blood vessels in this body are incredibly strong, and that its potential with the ancient mind is absurd. Seha is completely shocked to realize that he is already controlling the energy and celebrates that his disciple is a genius. Because of the old cold he felt in his body, the sensation of the heat of true thunder arises in him with extreme clarity. The young man slowly opens his eyes with a calm and focused look, showing that he has completed the initial process with complete success. The teacher begins to applaud joyfully, congratulating the boy, who looks back at her with great respect and gratitude. Reaching out to the boy, she curiously asks if he is able to copy her next move. She concentrates and manifests a brilliant burst of blue electricity around her wrist, with absolute ease. As she asks if he can do the same, he recalls the saying that one should never reveal one's own power. But the hero decides he doesn't need to hide his strength from his master, and begins to channel the same energy into his own hand. Seiha's eyes widened, unable to believe that the young man had actually managed to manifest the lightning so quickly. She gives a silly smile, thinking that she must have used up all her luck in life to find such a brilliant disciple. The young man says he also wants to learn fencing and movement techniques, and she agrees enthusiastically right away. She invites him to go with her to the Blue Sky Society, assuring him that he will find the perfect technique for him there. The boy becomes thoughtful, reflecting on what it means to learn a new martial art at that legendary association. He recalls that simply repeating the old techniques from his past palace would cause the same tragedy to happen again. Clenching his fists with determination, he decides that he will create new techniques to surpass his level from his past life. Shortly after, the two set off, walking side by side along the dirt path that cuts through the dense local forest. As they travel, the protagonist asks for more details about the mysterious and influential Society of the Blue Sky. The warrior reveals that the group is a large alliance formed by the survivors of clans destroyed by the demonic cult. The boy questions whether the organization's greatest virtues are truly justice, chivalry, and heroic act. He becomes confused and wonders if the ultimate destruction of the evil sect and revenge shouldn't be the absolute priority. She explains that the first leader taught that lives saved through sacrifices should not be thrown away in the heat of revenge. She explains that their main mission is to use the time they have left to welcome and help other people in need. The goal is to embrace true kindness and companionship instead of being consumed by the blind pursuit of revenge. Seiha explains that their enormous library holds manuals from destroyed clans and donations made by new members. The warrior stops walking for a moment and sadly reveals that her own family was also eliminated by the cult. She gives a bitter smile behind her hat, trying to hide the pain of that loss that still hurts her heart. The young woman explains that her skills blend the style of her former family with techniques selected from the library. He realizes that this must have been how the ancient techniques from his past palace ended up in their library. He mentally calculates that about 200 years have passed since his clan was decimated, and he was reincarnated in this body. The hero sincerely apologizes to his teacher for making her relive such a sad and painful matter from her past. She quickly recovers, laughing lightly, and says everything is fine before quickening her pace, saying they're almost there. The teacher tests him by asking about the wonders of the mountain where they live and is impressed by his quick answers. She explains that the great headquarters of the Blue Sky Society is completely camouflaged and hidden among those mountains. The warrior warns that they need to cross a magical barrier and asks him to follow her steps very carefully. Taking the correct step, the boy lets out a murmur of surprise at the sudden change of scenery before his eyes. He is shocked to discover that the sect's base was built on the exact spot where his former palace once stood. Several warriors greet them with formal bows, hailing the young woman as the great mistress of the pavilion of the celestial sword. She explains that everyone should wear a straw hat when going out, but remains mysterious when he asks the real reason behind it. The two walk down the imposing main corridor, while the young woman loudly announces that she has finally returned from her trip. An old man with a long white beard appears in the hall, asking if that is the young man she had spoken of in her letters. Seiha smiles from ear to ear and confirms with great pride that this young man is his newest and most talented direct disciple. The experienced elder observes the boy closely, noticing that the teacher must have seen something truly special in him. He explains that because of her recommendation, they will skip the theoretical tests and asks when the combat exam will be. The protagonist confidently interrupts and states categorically that he is ready to take the fighting test right now. The old man questions the haste since he has only just begun, and the boy confirms that he has only mastered the initial thunder technique. The man finds the young man's audacious attitude very interesting and decides to accept the challenge to see what he is capable of. An extremely strong warrior appears right behind the elder, ordering the boy to try and block a single blow from him. The imposing opponent advances heavily and introduces himself as the person in charge of the paint fragrance pavilion. The boy turns to his teacher, worried, and says that he has no weapon to defend himself from that attack. Seiha extends his own precious sword, saying that an ordinary weapon wouldn't be strong enough to withstand the impact. The protagonist respectfully accepts the weapon, thanking his master for trusting him at such an important moment. Kang Mong assumes his fighting stance and coldly advises the boy to simply dodge so as not to hurt himself unnecessarily. He warns with extreme seriousness in his penetrating gaze that the boy could end up losing his life if he tries to block the blow. Suddenly, the opponent moves at high speed, propelling his body up the stone stairs with overwhelming force. He leaps from a height with his sword raised, preparing a devastating vertical attack that terrifies those watching. With absolute calm, the protagonist positions himself with his mistress's sword, awaiting the exact moment for impact. The blades clash violently, and the boy immediately realizes that his opponent's physical strength is truly monstrous. Instead of trying to directly resist the impact, the young man begins to slide his blade to deflect the trajectory of the attack. With extreme skill and refined technique, he manages to redirect all the enemy's force and slide smoothly across his back. The muscular warrior is in utter shock when he realizes that his strongest blow was completely deflected by the boy. Taking advantage of the opening, the protagonist leaps with agility, raising his weapon to launch an immediate counterattack. Kang Mong manages to block in time, but realizes with horror that the boy copied the exact same technique he just used. The young man steps back with a graceful leap and lands perfectly on the ground, demonstrating incredible body control. The warrior gripped the hilt of his sword, his hands trembling as he felt the weight of the impact from that young prodigy. He stares thoughtfully at the boy's thin silhouette, unable to understand how someone so frail could possess so much power. The man concludes that such force of impact certainly didn't come from ordinary muscles alone. He realizes with horror that the boy was able to manifest the legendary and purest flow of energy in his own blade. Seiha begins clapping, filled with pride, upon seeing that her disciple not only blocked the attack, but also counterattacked. The opponent remained incredulous because the boy had said he only knew the basic techniques of meditation and internal energy. He looks at his own feet and notices skid marks on the stone floor, indicating that he was dragged by the boy's strength. He wonders how he could have been surpassed in that way by someone who only has the entry-level ranking. The wise old man observes everything from afar and reflects that the future of the Blue Sky Society will be guaranteed for the next few decades. Kang Mong is surprised to see that the great elder himself has descended the stairs, something he rarely does for the organization. The white-bearded master remarks that if the supreme leader were there, he would surely want to adopt the boy as a disciple. He walks solemnly up to the boy and asks his name, receiving the firm reply that it is Namgung Jun. The old man places his hand on his shoulder and officially declares him the newest active member of the prestigious Blue Sky Society. Seiha smiles radiantly beneath her hat and tells the boy that she hopes to see him leveling up and reaching the highest stages soon. The defeated opponent decides to explain that hierarchical position within the group depends on the number of clouds on their medal. He extends his hand to hand over the insignia, confessing that he learned a valuable lesson from the incredible combat demonstration. The hero accepts the silver cloud medallion, admiring the humble and honorable attitude of the examiner he has just defeated. He performs a solemn martial arts bow, thanking them for the medal that symbolizes his new rank in the group. Seiha excitedly asks if, with that medal, her new pupil is finally allowed to enter the armory. She grips the boy's arm tightly and drags him toward the storage room with great haste and excitement. As the two run, the old man smiles, predicting that with the right care, that boy will become a giant in this world. He concludes that while the teacher provides emotional support, they must give the young prodigy the perfect training foundation. Kang Mong remains in the courtyard staring at his own hand, still amazed by the astonishing talent he has just witnessed. He feels a slight tingling in the palm of his hand and wonders how a boy that age managed to deliver such a firm blow. The warrior informs the elder that the boy will likely need a new sword, which intrigues the old man. As the experienced warrior drew his own weapon from its sheath, he noticed a deep crack in the blade caused by the impact. Meanwhile, the two enter a gigantic pavilion known as the Internal Reflection Weapons Hall. The hero observes the colossal size of that storage facility, comparing its scale to the vast collections of his past. The two walk side by side through the rows of bookshelves, while the young man admires the impressive collection at his disposal. Seiha explains that they don't impose reading restrictions because everyone needs to become stronger to contain the threat of the cult. She takes an old book from the shelf containing the famous and dangerous spectral sword technique to show her student. The boy realizes that although there are no restrictions, there is a limit according to the level of the medal the reader is wearing. He understands the meaning of the place's name, realizing that it serves for the warrior himself to reflect on whether he has the capacity to read. The beautiful teacher kindly offers to choose the best textbook for him, but the young man politely declines the favor. The boy places his hand on his chest and states firmly that he prefers to find and choose a fighting style on his own. Seha simply stares at him with her beautiful bright eyes, a discreet smile forming a smile with the independent posture of her student. Seha agrees to his quest, but asks to see the secret manual he chooses at the end of that library. Twilight begins to paint the skies above the great society as silence takes over the imposing buildings. Jun begins to rummage through the manuals in a disorganized manner, piling several books on the floor under the watchful eye of a clerk. The attendant remembers Seha's recommendation to advise the boy if he got confused during the search. He remembers when the teacher warned him that she needed to deal with an urgent matter before leaving him there in the room. He observes the boy's strange behavior and wonders if he should really offer any advice to help him. Another book is thrown onto the enormous pile that is chaotically forming in the middle of the armory. The clerk is shocked to see the boy flipping through the pages at an unusually fast speed. He gets annoyed when he realizes that the young man is just throwing the books around instead of searching for them carefully. Determined to give a subtle warning, he approaches but is interrupted when Jun decides to grab one of the training swords. The young man reaches out to remove one of the wooden weapons from its stand to begin his own combat test. The employee is startled to see the boy wield the object and begin moving in a fighting stance. The hero unleashes a series of incredibly fast blows, leaving trails of precise movements in the air. The man's eyes widened, unable to believe the absurd and perfect speed of each of the boy's movements. He notes that the young man selected only manuals focused on fast sword techniques from clans of the past. Jun concentrates intensely as a powerful luminous energy begins to emanate from his training sword. A huge bluish shockwave explodes around the boy, shaking the entire pavilion in an impressive way. The impact is so strong that it makes the scrolls and objects tremble violently on the attendant's desk. The employee swallowed hard, utterly terrified, as he realized the magnitude of that single sword stroke from the boy. To him, that swift and devastating movement seemed like a true lightning bolt cutting through the darkness of the hall. Suddenly, a mysterious voice from the shadows asks who the boy is, making Jun look back in surprise. The hero notices an imposing and frightening figure standing right behind the startled barista. The man trembles with fear as the sinister presence repeats the question, wanting to know who possesses that technique. The red-haired man questions the origin of those martial arts techniques that the boy has just demonstrated. The protagonist feels an immediate chill upon recognizing the presence of a dense demonic energy within the intruder. He is surprised and wonders how a demonic human managed to infiltrate the heart of the Blue Sky Society. The shadowy figure watches the young man from above, while the clerk remains paralyzed beside his workstation. The boy remains on high alert, trying to understand how a monster from the cult could have gotten so far undetected. The attendant tries to explain, stammering, that the boy is just a rookie recruit who has just joined the society. The intruder dismisses the employee rudely, and the hero notices that he is wearing a medal with 4 black clouds. He questions what kind of martial art it is, since he has never seen such a technique in that pavilion of internal reflection. Noticing that the enemy shows no hostility, the young man calmly replies that he is creating his own sword. The man smiles slightly as he walks over the books on the floor and remarks that the boy doesn't seem to be bluffing. Finding that very interesting, he challenges the boy to demonstrate his technique, promising a special reward. The attendant desperately tries to intervene, reminding the boy that he has just learned his first basic method. The red-haired warrior orders him to simply watch in silence, while the employee cries for help. Jun assumes a firm fighting stance and declares in return that he desires a special elixir as a reward for victory. The opponent laughs in agreement and says he likes straightforward young men as he begins to draw his own real sword. He orders the boy to attack with full force and promises that he will not use internal energy to keep the fight balanced. The boy stares at him seriously and boldly replies that his opponent can use all his power if he deems it necessary. The man lets out a loud laugh, calling the young man crazy as he draws his blade to begin the duel. Jun advances at high speed, initiating his first form of rapid attack that collides directly with the opponent. The opponent blocks the blow, but his eyes widen in surprise as he feels the absurd weight of the boy's attack. He shouts with determination and makes a sharp movement to push the boy's blade away and regain control of the fight. The protagonist is thrown backward by the force of the impact, but manages to perform a perfect spin in the air. He glides smoothly across the stone floor and quickly stabilizes himself, preparing his next attack move. The young man shifts the stance of his blade mid-sweep, raising the trajectory of his cut toward the enemy's guard. He combines the fluidity of the 12 swords from the Dying Mountain to enhance the strength and precision of his new attack. By leaping high, the hero multiplies his single vertical attack into 3 distinct and simultaneous trajectories against the target. The red-haired warrior is completely perplexed to see the boy's incredible range of attacks. The opponent defends himself from the quick blows, realizing in disbelief that the boy is using his exact same fencing technique. He breaks into a wide smile when he notices that the young prodigy has even added a perfect variation on the original movement. While fighting, the hero feels his body finally regaining the heightened senses and skill of his past life. But he realizes that this weak body with its severed meridians won't hold up and decides to end the fight quickly. Jun mentally prepares himself, aware that he needs to be much faster and more precise in order to win. By perfectly adjusting his stance, the boy widens his fighting stride by a fraction of a second on the ground. With fluid and agile movements, he initiates the powerful 12th form, which he christened the Descent of the Eternal Lightning. A storm of bluish energy spreads throughout the armory, striking like devastating lightning bolts upon the opponent. The red-haired warrior blocks the enormous onslaught, gleaming amidst the electrical sparks generated by the collision. He lets out an insane laugh and confesses maniacally that the whole situation is extremely exciting. The protagonist resumes his stance, firmly gripping his training sword with both hands and fully concentrating. His eyes gleam intensely with a mystical energy as he analyzes every detail of his opponent's posture. The opponent observes the currents of martial energy and states that he can already see the trajectory of the next attack. The hero blinks slowly, preparing the correct flow of force to deliver a blow that the opponent will never forget. With the power in his hands being the purest spark of thunder, he decides to act like lightning and advance directly in a straight line. The weapon's handle glows brightly, accumulating the heat energy necessary to deliver the final blow with his eyes gleaming, he focuses all his mental strength on finding the best route of attack against the enemy's defense. The two collide once more in a deafening crash that makes the stone ground tremble under the impact of the two forces. Jun leaps from a great height, channeling the powerful 13th form to fall like a single, devastating thunderbolt upon his rival. A gigantic bluish flash consumes the entire library, obscuring the combatants amidst an explosion of energy. The boy gripped his sword tightly, his hand bleeding profusely from the overwhelming impact his weakened body had suffered. The enemy blocks the powerful blow, but mentally admits that he felt truly threatened by the young man's strength. His eyes widen as he realizes he broke his own promise and had to use his inner strength to defend himself. The two fighters quickly move away from each other, facing each other again in an atmosphere of total tension and absolute mutual respect. The dark-robed warrior lowers his blade, inwardly admitting that he has been completely cornered by the boy. He concludes with astonishment that this mysterious young man with black hair was born with an extraordinary spiritual power. He praises the sequence of the previous attack, commenting on the impeccable harmony contained in each of those movements. He asks if his newly created fencing technique has 13 forms in total, and the protagonist confirms that it does. The swordsman questions what the name of that art would be while the attendant sweats profusely, watching the entire interaction. The protagonist takes a deep breath and begins to pronounce the words to officially christen his signature fencing style. He reveals with pride and complete conviction that the fencing style is called the 13 Lightning Descents of the Flag. The attendant is shocked to realize that the young man used the fight against the feared senior to hone his own technique. He concludes that the level of that fencing created on the spot is equivalent to 3 clouds, and the senior focuses his dark eyes on the boy. Smiling from ear to ear, he says he really liked the boy and invites him to join the paint wheel pavilion. Jun's expression becomes confused as he tries to understand exactly what that strange hall he mentioned is. Suddenly, an elegant blue mango appears in the hallway, and a firm voice questions the meaning of that intrusion. The beautiful Seha enters the hall majestically and asks if his pavilion has now become a place for stealing other people's disciple. The red-haired warrior grinned mockingly and retorted that he simply liked the boy and saw no problem with that. The teacher becomes visibly irritated by his audacity and warns him in an intimidating manner not to touch her disciple, a spiritual representation of a bright-eyed tiger and a demonic serpent begin to clash in the hall. The opponent asks, laughing, if she wants to start a fight, while both of them raise their hands to the hilts of their swords. Ready. The protagonist intervenes amidst the heightened tension and calmly asks the two to stop fighting. He surprises them both by announcing loudly that he has indeed decided to go to the paint wheel pavilion to train. The warrior's eyes widened in utter shock upon hearing the sudden declaration of betrayal from her pupil. The boy explains that he will only do this when the time comes, acting as an occasional training partner for that strong leader. The beautiful mistress is completely speechless, while the red-haired warrior is surprised by that audacity. The legendary demon swordsman bursts into laughter and laughs loudly, finding the young man incredibly audacious and very interesting. The red-haired man hands over something mysterious and warns Namgung not to keep him waiting too long. Namgung receives a small black box, not quite understanding what's so important inside. The red-haired warrior bids farewell with a smile on his face and leaves under the gaze of the group. He leaves the scene at incredible speed, surprising everyone present with his agility. Master Seha becomes quite irritated and grumbles about how that man manages to be so annoying. When questioned about the object, Jun explains that it is the elixir promised to him by the warrior. The box reveals the white heron pill, excellent for those who are beginning to accumulate internal energy. Jun asks why they're going to the ink wheel pavilion instead of heading straight to the sword hall. The instructor explains that the new recruits go through an adaptation period and need to compete with each other. She says she can't simply place it in the main hall due to her sect's internal rules. The boy holds his little box tightly and vows with conviction that he will win all the necessary duels. Night falls over the lodgings of the great sect as all the warriors retire to rest. Alone in his room, the protagonist decides to ingest the powerful elixir to begin his training. Immediately after swallowing the pill, he feels an agonizing pain violently take over his entire chest. The young man realizes he is suffering a terrible internal convulsion caused by the strong reaction to the medication. He quickly sits up in a lotus position on the bed to try to control the flow of his vital energy. Jun uses fiery yang energy to contain the terrible pain whenever convulsions try to overwhelm him. He notices that his art of true thunder is evolving and plans to unleash the first point of energy. Completely exhausted after the extreme exertion, the young man collapses onto the bed, breathing with great difficulty. He focuses on physical strengthening the following day to avoid a dangerous diversion of his internal energy. The following day, the new recruits begin intense strength training in the sect's main courtyard. The white-bearded elder observes the new warriors and praises everyone's efforts in seeking talent. He walks contentedly through the courtyard, watching the young men train hard for their upcoming combat assessments. One of the instructors focuses his gaze in one direction and asks who the young woman training nearby is. Young Dan So-hai demonstrates a fierce technique capable of rivaling the great masters of the future. Even so, some say she still lags a little behind the legendary prodigy from the Shangxi region. Then they see Jun only doing simple physical squats instead of training with his sword. One of the observers is quite confused and wonders if the boy will really be able to win like this. They whisper that he should have mastered the basics before coming to such a high-level place. The experienced elder simply smiles and says that they will only know the truth when the young men confront each other. He then decides to organize the official placement exam in the format of a martial arts duel tournament. 3 days pass and the large combat arena is prepared, receiving a huge number of people. Spectators in the stands chat anxiously, eager to see which recruits will excel in the tournament. The sect's leaders and masters settle into the seats of honor to closely observe all the battle. The judge asks everyone present for silence and announces that the first martial arts duel will begin. A loud gong is struck forcefully, its sound echoing throughout the arena to officially mark the start of the combat. The announcer calls upon the young people Dan So-hai and Namgung to step forward into the center of the courtyard. The girl pulls out her gun and warns that she won't make it easy just because he's young, leaving Jun quite thoughtful. Without drawing his sword, The boy calmly replies that there is no need to wait. The young woman becomes extremely furious at the boy's audacity and clenches her teeth in response to his provocation. Screaming with rage, she charges forward at full speed to deliver a fatal blow to the protagonist. Jun simply focuses his extremely calm gaze and calculates the trajectory of the attack with mathematical precision. With a swift movement, the boy blocks the attack with an ease that leaves everyone astonished. The opponent's eyes widen in utter shock as she realizes her strongest attack has been nullified in an instant. She stands paralyzed as her sword falls to the ground, unable to understand how she was so easily defeated. The judge raises his hand and loudly declares Namgung Jun's overwhelming victory to everyone's surprise. The crowd in the stands erupts in cheers, unable to believe that the favorite has been defeated like this. The senior smiles contentedly in the stands while Master Seha shows great pride in her disciple. Dan Sohai trembles with indignation and whispers to herself that what just happened is impossible. She watches the young man walk away and realizes with horror that she has been defeated with a single simple move. The judge shouts, calling the next fighter to continue the martial arts duels in the arena. The crowd in the stands begins to whisper excitedly upon noticing the entrance of a very famous warrior. The advertiser introduces the young prodigy, saying that he is the rising star of the Shaanxi region. He reveals the name of the feared Baekri Cheong, who walks with utter elegance and grandeur towards the center of the courtyard. The fight begins, and the opponent advances quickly, while the young silver-haired warrior remains calm, sword sheathed. The rival clenches his teeth in indignation upon realizing that the prodigy refuses to draw his sword to face him. With a swift and precise strike, the boy blocks the enemy attack using only the sheath of his own weapon. In one spectacular move, he knocks down his opponent, who falls to the ground unable to react. Completely overwhelmed, the opponent stares at the prodigy's blade close to his neck and swallows hard in sheer terror. Baekri Cheong's gaze displays utter coldness, showing that the fight was no real challenge. He averts his eyes indifferently, maintaining a serene posture as if he already knew this would be the outcome. The stands erupt in celebration of the easy victory of that brilliant warrior who won with a single blow. The judge raises his arm and officially declares Baekri Cheong the winner of that quick round. Jun notices the prodigy's gaze on him and wonders if his rival is trying to intimidate him before the duel. The hero flashes a confident smile, mentally confirming that he has no intention of surrendering the final victory. The crowd gathers around the tournament table, knowing that the silver medalist has reached the final, but with a surprise. The official writes Namgung Jun's name on the official board, formalizing his advancement to the grand final. The disciples begin to whisper in confusion, for no one has ever heard of the origin of that mysterious boy. Even the pavilion leaders find it very strange that someone so absurdly strong doesn't have rumors about him. Seha discreetly covers his mouth, finding it very amusing to see everyone confused by his disciple's talent. She walks along, very excited and eager to see what will happen on the day of the final showdown of that great tournament. The day of the grand final of the tournament finally arrives, and the arena is completely packed with the best warriors. The Shaanxi prodigy faces his opponent, fixing his serious gaze on the name of his feared rival, Namgung Jun. He notes the boy's frail physical build, but acknowledges that the skill he displayed is surprising. Baekri Cheong concludes that the cutting power demonstrated by the protagonist in the tournament is truly fantastic. He remembers when Jun faced Dan So-hai and used a frighteningly refined and swift sword energy. The young, silver-haired man clenches his fists, focused on his mission, knowing he cannot afford to lose under any circumstances. He remembers the terrible tragedy of his clan, who bravely sacrificed themselves to protect him from the demonic sect. With eyes filled with determination, he mentally prepares himself to win that fight in order to carry out his revenge. A gigantic, muscular warrior steps heavily into the courtyard, asking if the young people are ready. He introduces himself as the Grand Master of the Iron Pavilion and announces that he will be the official referee of the final duel. The judge advises the finalists to give their best and fight a battle they won't regret in the future. He raises his arms, signaling the start of the duel, and shouts the order to begin the long-awaited final battle. Jun focuses on his rival, recalling the rumor that the silver-haired man's greatest specialty is the heavy sword. The prodigy from Shaanxi stomps firmly on the ground, preparing a high-speed charge to corner the hero. He charges forward, determined not to give the protagonist even a chance to breathe or use his quick defense. Baekri Cheong attacks with devastating force, tearing through the air with his blade towards the protagonist's chest. Jun maintains absolute composure even as the tip of his opponent's sword rapidly approaches his face. In an acrobatic and very elegant movement, the hero dodges the fatal blow by spinning his body with agility. The silver prodigy is completely shocked to realize that his attack was avoided so easily. The protagonist walks firmly on the ground, demonstrating simply extraordinary control of his body balance. The opponent notices the rapid shift in his center of gravity as Jun channels his Thunder Flash tech. Baekri Cheong is surprised to see that he doesn't use brute force, but rather the first strike of the single flash. The swords clash in an electric flash, generating an immense shockwave that sends dust flying everywhere. The silver prodigy blocks the attack with difficulty, wondering how that frail body possesses so much strength. He is pushed back by the tremendous wave of energy, but manages to recover by keeping his guard up. The crowd of spectators watches everything with their mouths agape, shocked by the terrifying level demonstrated in the final. Looking at his cracked blade, the young silver-haired man decides to ask his opponent a direct question in combat. He questions whether Jun's primary weapon wasn't originally intended to be a heavy sword style. The hero smiles mischievously and replies casually that in the world of martial arts, one must keep secrets. With his hand trembling on the sword's hilt, the prodigy chuckled softly. Impressed by his rival's skill, he sheathes his weapon honorably and declares aloud to the entire arena that he accepts his defeat. Jun offers a formal bow of respect and thanks them for the excellent martial arts duel they had. The entire crowd in the stands begins to shout and celebrate enthusiastically that spectacular victory. The sect leaders are amazed to see conflicts resolved so quickly and brilliantly. Seha claps her hands with a smile on her face, proud to see the magnificent performance of her new disciple. The tournament judge holds Jun's hand, raising it to officially declare the boy the grand champion. The hero smiles amicably, silently thanking everyone there for their recognition and support. The tournament referee hands a dark box to the winner, announcing that inside is their well-deserved reward. This is a legendary and valuable medicinal root with over 300 years of pure accumulation of vital energy. Jun calmly thanks him, leaving the judge surprised by his composure in the face of such a precious and rare elixir. The head of the Flying Gods Hall approaches and says that his group is among the top 3 in the entire sect. He advises that if the boy wants to become a master swordsman in the future, he should begin training with them. The Lord of the Sword is the supreme leader who heads and manages the 10 great pavilions of the prestigious society. The young man knows that to confront the terrible demonic cult, he will need to level up until he reaches that position. Jun watches the conversation, completely confused, not understanding why they are discussing his destiny. The red-haired master interrupts angrily, stating that the boy has already agreed to go to his salon. Another powerful master approaches, eager to compete for the new prodigy's entry into his division. The head of the cult-destroying pavilion guarantees full support and unlimited resources if the young man joins them. A heated argument begins to brew among the leaders who are desperately vying for the boy's favor. They continue to exchange barbs about who is more worthy of training the new martial arts tournament champion. The protagonist politely interrupts the argument, thanking them for their interest but stating that he has already made his decision. He loudly announces that he has chosen to join the pavilion of the Celestial Sword, making his mistress proud. The other masters are shocked, accusing Seha of cheating, while she smiles, saying that he is her disciple. The dark-robed leader realizes that the boy's energy signature perfectly matches her art. Jun performs a formal bow, confirming his desire to officially join the Seha Pavilion. The charismatic teacher accepts the oath with a beautiful smile on her face, welcoming the young man into her division. The young man travels to the top of the mountains, where the magnificent pavilion of the Celestial Sword is located. The young man finally arrives at his destination, but soon senses a tense and strange atmosphere in the entrance courtyard. He is immediately surrounded by several experienced disciples who point their swords at him. One of the veterans in the pavilion states defiantly that he has heard a lot about the newcomer's fast fencing. The veteran's leader draws his weapon, wanting to test if the new recruit is truly worthy of being there with them. The other disciples begin to laugh, believing that the boy will not undergo the traditional initiation rite. Gong Junam grins arrogantly, provoking the boy to see if he can handle the immense pressure of the place. The protagonist smiles calmly, replying that a true swordsman must speak through his blade. With utmost elegance, the young man accepts the challenge and begins to draw his weapon smoothly and with great precision. He unsheathes his gleaming blade, challenging the arrogant veteran to take the first step towards him. With a sharp and focused gaze, the boy mentally prepares to demonstrate the full strength of his new fencing skills. The two fighters face each other in the center of the courtyard, under the watchful eyes of all the local witnesses. The veteran advances with extreme speed, delivering a devastating vertical blow against the hero in the courtyard. With agile footwork, the protagonist glides across the stone floor, masterfully avoiding the first blow. Jun executes an incredible sequence of dodges, leaving behind movement trails that confuse his opponent. Gong Junam's eyes widened in shock as he noticed the newcomer using the legendary infinite steps technique. He despairs at seeing a mere recruit master the sect's most advanced movements with complete perfection. The two swords begin to clash at high speed, generating bright sparks across the battlefield. From the rooftop, Seha watches the fight proudly, seeing that the boy did not back down despite the intense pressure from the group. The other veterans admit with astonishment that the boy's cutting speed is in no way inferior to their leaders. They realize with alarm that the hero is not merely defending himself, but rather controlling the pace of the fast-paced combat. Gong Junam begins to sweat profusely as he notices that his opponent's attack speed continues to increase relentlessly. He is perplexed to see cuts of such power coming from a body so young and without much accumulated energy. Gong Junam watches Jun catch his breath, perfectly understanding why his master chose him. The veteran gives an excited smile and admits that he is extremely curious to test the boy's abilities. Holding the hilt of his sword firmly, he wonders to himself how far the boy will be able to keep up with his pace. Suddenly, Seha's firm voice echoed through the place, ordering the two to stop the confrontation immediately. Junam looks at the rooftop and wonders if the leader is only concerned with protecting her precious young pupil. The warrior sheathes his weapon and amicably suggests that in their next duel, they use a heavy sword to fight. He flashes a warm smile and formally introduces himself as Gong Junam, welcoming his new companion. Jun responds with a respectful bow, saying it is a great honor to meet such a talented senior member of the sect. Dusk falls over the majestic pavilion, while the sound of swords and training echoes softly through the hills. The other disciples surround Jun, curious to know if he really defeated his rivals with a single blow in the tournament. They cheerfully congratulate the young man, stating that everyone there should learn from the newcomer's extraordinary talent. The dark, starry night falls over the temples under the soft light of a bright crescent moon in the mountain sky. Alone in his room, the boy kneels down in great pain, realizing that his seizures are getting much worse. He breaks out in a cold sweat as he notices that the cold energy from his ruptured meridians is acting with a far more devastating force. He concentrates to use the heat of his true thunder technique and endure until the terrible pain subsides. In the midst of his terrible suffering, Jun hears quick footsteps rushing past his bedroom door. Two warm hands, brimming with golden energy, are placed on his back, instantly relieving the freezing pain. Jun looks back in surprise as he realizes that his master, Seha, has come running to help him control the uncontrolled flow. She channels her powerful golden aura, healing the disciple and balancing the temperature of his weakened body. The boy thanks her, relieved, while the teacher explains that she felt the fluctuation of his energy from very far away in the pavilion. He explains that he urgently needs to raise the level of his yang art in order to contain these painful crises. She agrees, noting that the yin energy in his body will grow too quickly if he doesn't control the necessary heat. Because of this, the hero asks Seha for help to safely ingest his powerful medicinal root. The young teacher is surprised for a brief moment to hear such a serious request coming from her young disciple. Immediately afterwards, she breaks into a beautiful smile and accepts the mission, confidently assuring the young man that he can count on her. Without wasting a second, Jun bites off a piece of the mystical root, preparing his body to absorb that immense power. He begins to chew, knowing that even if it's not a perfect elixir, that old remedy will give him enormous strength. The hero swallows the piece, concentrating so that the vital energy spreads correctly through his circulation. Seha positions herself behind the boy, placing her hands on his shoulders to guide the flow and prevent wasted energy. He focuses on circulating the heat of the true thunder to prevent the immense power of the pill from destroying his meridians. An immense explosion of golden light engulfs the room as the two unite their energies in a perfect process. Thanks to the boy's perfect control, the energy merges in a divine way, like a master trained for decades. Seiha is amazed and in disbelief when she realizes that Jun was able to absorb every drop of power from that ancient root. She reflects, startled, for she has never heard of anyone who could harness all the energy of such an elixir. The protagonist's eyes shine intensely, revealing a genius-level aptitude that surpasses any innate limitation. Impressed, she tells him he can now try the promotion test, and he thanks her, promising to dedicate himself even more. With a loving look, the teacher bids him farewell, wishing him a good rest before leaving the young man's room. She walks silently along the beautiful path surrounded by tall green bamboo under the soft light of early morning. As she walks, Seiha reflects deeply on the incredible meditation and breathing technique she has just witnessed. Suddenly, a flood of brilliant thoughts surges through her mind, causing her to stop in her tracks. She starts running, realizing she has finally discovered the secret to breaking through the barrier of her own martial art. With a radiant smile on her face, the beautiful young woman mentally thanks her brilliant disciple for that great help. The following day, the sun's rays illuminated the entire pavilion, marking the beginning of another day of hard training. Gong Junam demonstrates her flawless swordsmanship by cutting a training dummy with extreme speed in front of the entire class. He introduces the new cutting technique and warns that everyone needs to master it to be allowed to undertake missions. The senior instructor guides the recruits to carefully observe the movements so they can begin practicing on the wooden dummies. One of the new disciples positions himself to attempt the coup, but stops in shock upon noticing something unbelievable beside him. Another young warrior turns around, his eyes wide and his mouth agape in sheer surprise at the unusual scene. Everyone stares in amazement at Jun, who cut the training dummy in half with perfect precision on his first try. The veterans begin to whisper, unable to believe what they've seen, and suspect that the teacher had already taught it to them in secret. He is surprised to remember seeing the pavilion mistress leaving Namgung Jun's quarters yesterday morning. He asks Namgung Jun directly if the pavilion mistress gave him any private lessons in secret. The young man denies this and says that instead of private lessons, they can go straight to a more advanced technique. Jun confidently suggests they move on to learning the great sword extension technique right away. Other disciples are shocked to see that he learned a complex martial art so quickly. The senior recognizes the young man's brilliant talent, but is concerned about the impact this will have on the other members. The warriors comment that it's good to have such an ally, but admit they need to train so they don't fall behind. He enthusiastically agrees and decides that he will personally teach the boy the great sword extension technique. The senior asks Jun to observe the movements carefully, while the young man respectfully prepares to follow. Meanwhile, the great leaders gather at an important conference in the Blue Sky Society room. The rapporteur presents the chaotic situation in Jiangxi and says that the Iron Battle Camp is acting behind the scene. One of the members suggests a forceful intervention, and the red-haired warrior volunteers for the mission. Finally, the leader initiates a debate about allowing Namgung Jun to enter Jianghu's martial world. Master Seiha listens attentively, knowing that sending the young man back to the outside world is a delicate matter. One of the advisors asks, surprised, if the boy really suffers from the terrible condition of cold meridian. He shouts, saying that the original mission was precisely to prevent a young man with such power from falling into the hands of a demonic cult. The man argues that sending the boy back would be dangerous, since the cult would love to capture someone using such a technique. The great leader firmly places his glass on the table and calls directly for the mistress of the sword pavilion. The old man with the long white beard calmly looks at Seiha and asks for her opinion on the matter. She replies firmly that she doesn't see Namgung Jun as a weak young man who needs constant protection. She recalls that the boy once said that whoever doesn't take responsibility for their art shouldn't use a sword. The beautiful teacher recalls in detail the first and intense confrontation she had with the boy when they met. She argues that society should guide young talent so that they can become the great divine force of the future. Jun appears focused and determined to follow his own martial path, unafraid of the difficulties that lie ahead. The red-haired man slammed his fist on the table, irritated by the other council members' fear of the young man. He stands up and asks aloud if there has ever been anyone with such potential and ability as the young man. The red-haired warrior looks disdainfully at everyone around him and states that, at least in that room, there is no one like him. He ridicules the cowardice of those present, saying that they tremble with fear before a sharp weapon in their hands. The leader in blue robes agrees and highlights the simply extraordinary talent the boy possesses for creation. The group is beginning to accept that, with the right experience, the newcomer will become the greatest asset to that society's strength. The supreme leader reflects on the words and proposes allowing the young man to enter the martial world for the time being. He suggests, however, that his missions remain completely free of any connection to the dreaded demonic cult. The other masters nod in approval and quickly agree with the wise decision made. The red-haired warrior sits down again, satisfied with the outcome of that intense discussion. Master Seha gives a discreet smile of relief as she realizes that her plan to help her pupil worked. The scene shifts to a bustling port where the young hero's first mission is announced. To Anhui Province, Jun confirms that he must investigate a dangerous orthodox group that has been causing problems in the Dongling region. He glances sideways from under his straw hat, thinking he could resolve the whole situation on his own. In a flashback, the teacher explains the details about the first mission that would be officially given to the boy. She introduces the experienced Yahello and determines that the two should work together on the boy's first journey. The young man offers a polite greeting to his new travel companion, demonstrating complete respect for the veteran. As they walk together, Jun notices a bottle hanging from the senior's waist and becomes quite curious about it. He makes a suspicious face and asks his companion directly if it might be alcoholic beverage. The veteran laughs and explains that he only needs to drink a little when he wields his sword to fight for real. Jun becomes even more worried about his partner's habit as they head towards the local market. Elsewhere on the river, men aboard a boat shout orders to pull someone out of the water. One of the henchmen pulls a thick rope with considerable force to hoist a prisoner back onto the deck. A poor, soaked man inside an iron cage is pulled out, coughing profusely from having swallowed too much water. The leader of the henchmen looks mockingly at the prisoner and asks if he is finally ready to talk. The villain smiles cruelly, demanding that he pay his entire debt immediately or hand over his own daughter. The poor man cries inside the cage, begging for more time and saying he can't give up his own daughter. The villain, with red eyes and a terrifying expression, ruthlessly orders that the man be locked back in. The prisoner is thrown back into the water while desperately screaming for mercy. A commanding voice orders them to stop what they're doing. While Jun calmly appears in the background of the bridge, the gang leader turns around, surprised, and angrily asks who the intruder is who dares to interrupt. Jun, beneath his straw hat, mocks the group, noting that they belong to the Blue Sky Society. A close-up on the protagonist's serious and sharp gaze shows that he has no intention of backing down. The bandit leader laughs disdainfully, finding it ridiculous that a mere rookie would want to give him orders. The enraged villain curses the boy, calling him a crazy bastard, unaware of the terrible danger he is in. Suddenly, the hero activates his powerful technique of 13 electric rays, illuminating the entire area. The young prodigy channels the third form of his martial art, enveloping his blade in pure electricity. With terrifying speed, he cuts the henchman off the deck in the blink of an eye and effortless. Jun reflects with disdain on how the methods of orthodox sects remain corrupt over time. From above, we see the wooden bridge covered in mist where all the enemies fell defeated to the ground. The protagonist reaches out to the trembling prisoner and calmly asks if he is all right. The defeated bandit leader writhes on the ground, spitting blood, completely shocked by such force. The man tearfully thanks them and runs away while Yahello calmly approaches Jun. Yahello lightly taps his drink bottle while silently assessing the young man. The senior observes that the boy possesses an incredibly calm fencing style and acts without any hesitation. He notes that the boy accurately calculated his opponent's strength before delivering the decisive blow. The veteran realizes that Jun's skills are far too advanced for a mere newly arrived recruit. He concludes, surprised, that the boy's level of mastery is something totally out of the ordinary for his age. With a discreet smile, the experienced warrior sheathes his sword, thinking that he will have much to recount. The clear sky with white clouds marks the beginning of the next stage of our hero's journey. They finally reach the entrance to the enemy fortress, which is guarded by a watchman armed with a spear. The gate guard turns around, startled upon noticing suspicious footsteps and shouts, asking who is approaching. In response, a powerful burst of electrical energy surges forth, enveloping the protagonist's sharp blade. In the blink of an eye, Jun lunges at the guard, delivering a clean and precise cut that knocks him down. The sound of the falling body echoes through the quiet, fog-shrouded village, initiating their silent invasion. Inside a cabin, the villains drink with women and jokingly discuss the debts they are collecting. A tanned bandit hugs a young woman and says they're going to make a lot of money selling the prisoners. Suddenly, the front doors are destroyed with a terrifying bang, leaving everyone present in a panic. Jun emerges imposingly from the dust, his sword gleaming, and declares that they will pay dearly for their crime. The bandits rise in utter shock as they try to understand who dared to invade their place like that. One of the leaders notices the boy's blue clothes and iconic straw hat. Realizing the danger, they shout that he belongs to the Blue Sky Society and order everyone to attack him together without mercy. The young swordsman spins his weapon with extreme skill, channeling the electrical power of his powerful technique. Raising his gleaming blade high, he moves with agility, preparing to face the wave of enemies. He delivers a crushing blow to the ground, releasing a massive electric shockwave throughout the hall. Several opponents who attempted to attack are struck simultaneously by Jun's powerful lightning energy. A skilled henchman leaps with his spear, attempting to surprise the boy with a swift attack from above. He throws his weapon towards the hero in an attempt to injure him at all costs during the chaos. Several knives are thrown at the protagonist, who remains calmly atop the wreckage. Jun gives a slight smile at the corner of his mouth and whispers disdainfully that their attacks are slow and sloppy, with incredibly fast movements. He blocks and deflects all enemy projectiles in an instant. The attackers' bodies are hurled high into the air and plummet lifeless, while Jun keeps his guard up. Enraged, the three main gang leaders charged forward together, roaring and cursing the arrogant boy. They leap towards the hero, delivering coordinated cuts to try and corner him, leaving no room to escape. The unfriendly-looking leader's eyes widen in shock as he notices the boy has vanished from his sight. Jun appears in the air above them, head first, his sword ready to deliver a decisive aerial strike. Jun lands gracefully, stepping precisely onto the blades of all three leaders at once. With a swift and deadly movement, he disarms his opponents, leaving everyone in shock at such skill. One of the leaders falls to his knees screaming in pain from his severed hand while Jun firmly plants his weapon. Seeing all his defeated companions on the stone ground, one of the survivors calls him a monster. The other gang members recoil in terror as they are ordered to stay away from the boy. The experienced gang leader emerges imposingly and announces that he himself will personally take care of that boy. Meanwhile, inside the fortress, Yahello silently knocks out the guards to rescue the hostages. The veteran advances relentlessly, delivering a precise blow that takes down yet another of the local henchmen. The enemy collapses unconscious right in front of the wooden cells where the terrified civilians are being held. The civilians weep with relief upon realizing they are being saved by that skilled, white-haired warrior. Jun recalls when he spoke with his partner about his incredible ability to track people. He had suggested drawing the attention of all the enemies while Yahello infiltrated to save the civilians. Jun seriously emphasizes that the safety of those innocent people was their absolute priority. The veteran mentally admits that he was a little worried that Jun had joined the sect without taking the test. He acknowledges with satisfaction that the young man possesses not only brilliant skills but also a very noble heart. With a warm smile, Yahello calms the trapped people, assuring them that they no longer need to worry. He casually tells them to go outside and get some fresh air after the terrible ordeal. Outside, the henchmen watch anxiously as their powerful leader begins to struggle in battle. The gang leader is violently pushed back under the protagonist's relentless and lightning-fast attack. The old leader gritted his teeth in fury, unable to understand how a mere boy could possess such immense energy. The villain feels immense pressure and compares the boy to a demonic spirit trained for decades in swordsmanship. He tries to threaten the boy, shouting that he will kill all the captured civilians if Jun doesn't surrender immediately. The protagonist merely gives a slight smile, demonstrating that he had already expected that cowardly act. Jun calmly informs them that he is not acting alone, and that by now all the hostages should be safe. The old villain panics completely and stammers, trying to convince the young hero to listen to his peace proposal. Without giving him a chance to make excuses, the protagonist leaps towards him, preparing his final attack. With a single swift and devastating slash, Jun opens a crater in the ground and strikes the leader of the rival gang squarely. Suddenly, an extremely strong old man appears unexpectedly and blocks Jun's attack to save the gang leader. An immense wave of overwhelming energy is unleashed against the hero, generating a terrible explosion in the courtyard. Jun realizes he won't have time to draw his sword to defend himself from that devastating surprise attack. With no other option, The boy decides to use his own bare hands to contain the terrible impact of the enemy energy. A powerful flaming blue aura surrounds the protagonist as he withstands the terrifying onslaught. The two opposing forces collide violently, generating a large cloud of smoke that consumes the entire battlefield. The mysterious old man walks in, surprised to see that a 20-year-old managed to block his double palm. Jun keeps his gaze focused and cold, analyzing every movement of that new and dangerous adversary that has appeared. The old man, dressed in black with a long white beard, demands to know the boy's true identity immediately. He notices the Blue Sky Society insignia on Jun's sleeve as he approaches with slow, steady steps. He complains angrily, saying that the young man completely ruined his lucrative retirement business there. He looks at the defeated gang leader and calls him a fool for dying so pathetically after the deal. Jun reflects in surprise, realizing that this small gang of loan sharks had a powerful criminal mastermind working behind the scene. He points his bloodied blade at the old man in black and coldly challenges him to inevitable combat. The young man says he would like to know many more details about this business scheme he mentioned. Jun assumes a fighting stance, suggesting that the elder postpone his retirement until they have a real conversation. The old man becomes furious and activates his fiery palms, cursing the hero for being insolent and speaking so boldly. The villain propels himself forward with extreme agility, kicking up a large cloud of dust on the ground. Jun channels the celestial thunder palm technique he learned in the library to counterattack his powerful opponent. The two clash their powerful palms, generating an immense explosion of energy that illuminates the entire courtyard of the fortress. The boy leaps back with an agile jump while the old man is pushed back by the strong shockwave of the impact. The villain stares in shock at his own burned hand, realizing the immense power of the boy's electric strike. His eyes widen in terror as he notices that the protagonist has accumulated powerful pure yang energy in his body. The old man advances furiously, determined to steal, by any means necessary, the powerful yang energy cultivated by the young man. He extends his flaming claw toward Jun's face, who tries to dodge the blow with great agility. The courtyard is destroyed by the immense force of the claw's impact, which shreds everything in its path. Jun realizes that the force and intent behind that attack are completely different from anything he has ever seen. With a swift and precise movement, the protagonist firmly grips the dark robes of his dangerous opponent. He delivers a powerful punch to the villain's stomach, taking advantage of the opening created after grabbing his clothes. The old man spits blood and realizes with horror that the boy truly has complete control over his technique. He staggers back as a terrifying, dark energy begins to spread throughout his body. The villain reveals that this is the dreaded technique of celestial absorption art used to steal vital energy. Jun scorns his opponent, asking if his energy is pathetic for having learned such a dirty technique. The old man screams in pure fury and feels utterly humiliated by the young hero's provocative words. He lunges forward in a completely insane manner, shouting that he desperately wants to devour the boy's energy. The villain obsessively believes that if he manages to absorb his yang energy, he will reach the top of the martial arts world. With bloodshot eyes, he charges forward, calling the boy a rat and unleashing immense destructive force. Jun leaps gracefully onto the roof of the fortress, escaping the furious onslaught of that insane opponent. The boy questions whether he allied himself with the terrible demonic cult just to pull off such a pathetic trick. The elder flies towards the roof, confirming that he no longer has any reason to hide his terrible alliance. He lets out a sinister laugh, vowing to devour every last drop of the protagonist's inner energy. Jun coldly replies that he's heard everything he needed to hear, leaving the villain confused mid-attack. With an extremely powerful and precise punch, the boy strikes the villain in the face, causing him to scream in pure pain. The old man is violently thrown back to the floor of the fortress, breaking several roof tiles in his wake. He falls backward onto the courtyard with colossal force, raising dust and pieces of stone everywhere. The villain lies writhing on the floor, his face completely bloodied, unable to comprehend such humiliation. Jun lands firmly on the wreckage, facing his defeated opponent with a cold and merciless expression. On the brink of death, the old man begins to desperately plead for mercy as he realizes he has been overcome. Jun raises his blade and unleashes a devastating electric bolt to definitively end that terrible opponent. Blood drips down the protagonist's blade after he eliminates the dangerous traitor and ends the threat there. The hero cleans his sword and notices that the old man was carrying a small, mysterious book in the pocket of his robes. Yahello rushes to the scene and is completely astonished to see the enormous destruction that has taken over the courtyard. Jun greets his partner calmly, while the veteran jokingly says that the young man really made a terrible mess. Yahello recognizes the elder's body, revealing him to be a despicable traitor allied with the demonic cult. The two reflect in silence on the gravity of the situation as they link the Loan Shark gang directly to the cult. The senior officer wonders to himself what kind of prodigy recruit could accomplish such a feat on his first mission. Jun decides to hand over the mysterious diary he found with the traitor, so that the senior can analyze its content. The experienced warrior begins to leaf through the pages of the notebook, and realizes with alarm that it is a logbook. He swallows hard, a great tension on his face, as he reads the first terrible entries made in that diary. At that moment, a rescued little boy approaches crying and says that he can't find his beloved sister. One of the civilians desperately recounts that several guards took some children away shortly before their arrival. The child clutches the hero's robes tightly, pleading with all her heart for them to save her little sister. The little boy breaks down in tears, begging on his knees for the brave warriors to bring the children back. Yahello reveals that the diary is a record of child trafficking, and Jun warns that they need to follow them immediately. However, the veteran places his hand on the young hero's chest and sternly warns him that his mission ends at that moment. Jun is completely confused and questions his partner upon hearing that he must return immediately to the great sect. He recalls the direct order from the leaders to keep the young man away from anything connected to the demonic cult. Yahello apologizes to the boy and insists that he obey the rules and return to the safety of the pavilion. Jun clenches his fist in extreme anger upon hearing the name of the terrible group that destroyed his entire clan in the past. He becomes deeply indignant upon realizing that the elders continue to try to protect him from his own fate. The veteran, with his back turned, reinforces that the path ahead is too dangerous for a recruit and orders him to turn back. Even though he is sad and upset, the boy knows he cannot simply abandon those innocent children to their fate. The senior stopped in his tracks in the middle of the courtyard when he realized that the young man was definitely not an ordinary recruit. The veteran states with complete seriousness that this is not just a suggestion and firmly orders him to back down. Jun continues walking with firm steps, categorically refusing to turn back simply out of fear of danger. He shouts, asking how he could retreat now that he has already drawn his sword in the name of justice and virtue. A close-up of the young man's bright, furious gaze shows that his determination to help is simply unwavering. The experienced senior smiles, finding the newcomer very interesting, and agrees to go together to rescue the children. Yahello points to himself and confidently asserts that his nickname, Hunter's Sword, never fails to find its target. Without wasting any time, the two ran at great speed into the dense forest under the soft light of dusk. They used their most advanced body agility techniques to cross the forest, leaving almost no trace. The two make spectacular leaps through the treetops, maintaining terrifying speed in pursuit of the enemy. The veteran points in a specific direction in the forest, indicating that the group followed that exact path. He asks Jun to carefully observe the marks left on the dirt floor so they can continue the quick chase. Yahello reveals that those are the demonic footprints of the cult, and that they will soon be able to reach the carriages. Jun reflects in amazement at how his senior's tracking skills have reached an unbelievable level. He realizes that the experienced hunter doesn't miss a single detail or hidden trace in the woods. The boy thinks that, his partner must have inherited valuable teachings from some brilliant master of the past. Jun finally understands the real reason why the veteran had insisted so much that he returned to the sect sooner. He notes that even though he has trained hard on the basics and eaten well since joining the group, it is still difficult. The young man confesses, exhausted, that his current physical stamina is still very weak and that he can barely keep up with the senior. While the young man tries to catch his breath, the veteran excitedly announces that they have finally found the group ahead. Yahello points to the carriages and announces that the gang plans to board a ship on the great Yangtze River just ahead. The boy says determinedly that they need to hurry before it's too late to intercept the group. The veteran agrees, stating that if the criminals board the ship, it will simply be impossible to go after them. Jun notices with emotion that Yahello was slowing his own running pace just to wait for him in the forest. The boy suggests that the veteran go ahead to buy time while he tries to catch up with all his might. The senior pats Jun's straw hat in a friendly way and simply asks him to save enough energy for the fight. Yahello disappears in the blink of an eye, leaping at high speed towards the road where the criminals are. The young man vows to himself that as soon as he returns from this mission, he will completely master the art of self-defense. Down below, the henchmen are complaining about being bored, while Yahello observes everything hidden from the top of a large tree. The hunter coldly assesses the situation, counting about 10 armed guards escorting the prisoner carriages. He begins preparing his throwing weapons hidden under his cloak, focused on buying time until Jun appears there. Suddenly, one of the henchmen is unexpectedly struck in the neck by a sharp dagger and collapses almost silently. The other guards panicked, yelling for everyone to be on the lookout for weapons hidden in the woods. From high above, Yahello unleashes a precise rain of small flying blades against the disoriented flock in its path. Several henchmen are hit at the same time, falling bloodied to the dirt floor, not understanding where the attacks are coming from. The enemy commander blocks one of the daggers, puzzled as to why the invader only throws weapons from a distance. He grins wickedly as he quickly deduces the hero's true plan behind all that combat. He shouts, ordering the group to ignore the lone intruder and continue moving the carriages to the port without further delay. Yahello angrily realizes that the criminals were quick to understand his plan and began to flee with the carriages. With no other option to delay them, the hunter decides to draw his own sword to fight them all up close. He descends from the branch in spectacular fashion, delivering a powerful slash that strikes one of the horses in the herd squarely. The wooden carriage overturns violently on the road, the impact raising a lot of dust and pieces of wood. Inside, the trapped children cry out in terror, desperately calling for help amidst the chaos. A little girl, crying and trembling with fear, begs the mysterious hero to take her out of that terrible dark cage. Yahello is deeply shaken and filled with rage upon seeing all those innocent children imprisoned up close. The furious gang leader runs towards the hero, shouting and demanding to know who the audacious attacker is. Suddenly, a mysterious warrior dressed in black leaps from above to deliver a powerful kick against him. The brutal blow strikes the hunter, who is violently propelled by the devastating force of the enemy impact. It slides across the ground for several meters, raising a huge cloud of dust, until it manages to stabilize itself on the road. He was sweating with cold, thinking he would have died instantly if that absurd kick had hit him squarely in the chest. The hunter cautiously raises his guard, facing the dangerous, dark-clad warrior who has just revealed himself. The cult warrior mocks the situation, pointing at Yahello and saying that he is trembling with fear on the ground. Yahello gives a slight disdainful smile upon hearing that and calmly places his hand on the drinking flask at his waist. Without hesitation, the experienced senior begins to take a large gulp of alcohol, completely ignoring the enemy's provocation. The opponent is very intrigued and, with a skeptical smile, asks if he's really going to drink during the fight. Yahello responds with utter coldness, saying that he only fears one person in the world, and that person is certainly not that henchman. Immediately afterwards, the hunter moves with quick steps, unleashing a violent attack that catches the opponent off guard. The cult warrior narrowly dodges, but is startled to notice how Yahello's movements have suddenly changed. He realizes with terror that his opponent's reaction speed and focus have risen to a frighteningly high level. The two begin exchanging brutal blows in the forest, generating a massive collision of destructive energies in the courtyard. The roar of the intense confrontation echoes violently through the trees, shaking the entire dense forest around them. Yahello unleashes a series of blows with his sword, while the dangerous enemy tries to dodge and counterattack. The opponent gains distance by stomping firmly on a tree branch to prepare for a new high-speed attack. He leaps upon Yahello, unleashing a rapid sequence of brutal kicks that leaves the experienced senior in trouble. Yahello tries to block the attack with his sword, but the tremendous force of the kick pushes him violently back. He anxiously realizes he is being cornered and wonders if that man is actually a high-ranking officer. A revelation explains that all warriors of the demonic cult receive instruction in the art of yin or yang essence. Those most experienced officers who manage to perfectly master these techniques achieve the coveted elite rank. Yahello suddenly notices the agile movement of other shadowy silhouettes rapidly approaching through the forest. The cult official attacks again, shouting mockingly as he sees the hunter dodging like a frightened rat in the woods. The hunter knows perfectly well that to face an opponent of that level, one needs at least 3 power clouds. Yahello becomes very worried, thinking it would be too dangerous to let young Namgung face this monster. At that moment, the cult official makes a slight lapse in his balance, creating an opening in the fight. Yahello immediately sees the perfect opportunity to attack and decides he needs to do everything he can to stop him there. He executes a swift strike aimed at his enemy's neck, determined to end the dangerous duel in a single movement. He clenches his teeth in horror upon realizing that his opponent managed to defend the surprise attack in the last fraction of a second. The villain grins sadistically and replies sarcastically that the hunter's attempt was very poor and useless. The officer takes advantage of the senior's mistake, delivering a brutal punch that catches him completely defenseless in the middle of the courtyard. Then he delivers another violent kick, pushing the hunter's body, who is no longer able to react to the blows. Yahello desperately tries to protect his face, but the immense force of the impact makes his whole body tremble in pain. He realizes with horror that his current inner strength is far inferior to that of his monstrous and relentless adversary. With that, the experienced senior is thrown back with extreme violence, suffering a crushing defeat in the woods. Inside the wrecked carriage, the children cry desperately, begging the hero not to die there. He spits blood and staggers to his feet, trying to mask the pain by pretending the attacks were insignificant. The villain becomes furious with the hero's attitude and vows that he will not let him die an easy and painless death there. Yahello gripped the hilt of his sword tightly with his last strength, mentally preparing himself for his final battle. Suddenly, a swift silhouette descends from the sky with a devastating kick, knocking down one of the guards approaching Yahello. The other henchman of the demonic cult turns around, completely startled, upon noticing the sudden arrival of the intruder. Feet wearing white and black shoes land softly on the dirt road, raising a light dust on the ground. The young hero calmly walks past the cult henchman, who has just been completely defeated. The cruel cult leader's eyes widen, unable to comprehend how his elite subordinate was defeated so easily. Jun approaches Yahello, who is lying fallen near the carriage, and greets him with his usual calm demeanor. The protagonist calmly draws his sharp blade and politely asks if he now has permission to intervene. The veteran reflects that instead of worrying about the rule-breaking, he feels immense relief at seeing the young man there. With a beautiful smile, Yahello admits that he is no ordinary rookie and entrusts the fate of that battle to the young man. The dangerous cult leader stares at Jun with disdain and asks if a mere boy is the reinforcement sent to stop him there. The bandana-wearing opponent notices that the young warrior hasn't even turned 20 yet. He is quite impressed by the incredibly sharp and intense aura emanating from the boy's body. The man with the scar on his face begins to wonder if he may have made some kind of error in judgment. The enemy laughs loudly, finding it ridiculous that the two of them, being only novice warriors, were trying to attack him together. At that point, the opponent launches an attack, mockingly saying that the boy only knows how to bluff. He delivers a downward kick, arrogantly declaring that his rival is nothing but a brat. Namgung dodges the attack, knowing he is at a technical disadvantage in terms of cultivation level. He reflects that ordinary warriors only train in basic forms and circulate their energy internally. Meanwhile, those who reach the peak realm are able to manifest this power outside of their body. This external manifestation serves to drastically increase the strength and destructive power of each attack. The rival advances confidently, questioning what a mere low-level recruit could possibly do against him there. The man in black continues his aggressive assault, certain that the protagonist will have no escape. Suddenly, the young hero firmly plants his foot, generating sparks of pure energy on the forest floor. The opponent with the scar on his face is confused when he notices the sudden change in his young rival's posture. Namgung advances like lightning toward the enemy, moving with extreme speed and determination. He knows that sword power and palm strength are only small parts of the vast martial path. He executes a spectacular sequence of quick cuts and movements while his opponent tries to defend himself. The two exchange violent blows, and the boy in the hat displays simply impressive agility. The enemy retreats angrily, calling the boy a persistent pest after failing to keep up with his speed. Namgung lands gracefully on the dirt ground, preparing to launch another swift attack. The opponent completely loses patience and attacks furiously. demanding that the protagonist die immediately. The hero simply focuses his gaze and reflects with confidence that he can do anything if he has a sword in his hand. A thunderous blue flash erupts when the two collide violently, generating an immense wave of power. The dust slowly begins to settle in the forest as the devastating battle finally comes to an end. The villain spits out a lot of blood, unable to understand how he was defeated by a mere low-level warrior. He falls defeated to the ground while staring at the back of the boy who demonstrated unbelievable skill. After the ordeal, the two companions walk together along the trail, and Yahello praises the young hero's effort. Namgung expresses his gratitude, but shows considerable concern upon noticing the terrible injuries of his veteran colleague. He notices that the senior citizen has a badly injured and bandaged leg from the fight in the forest. The young man deeply regrets feeling that the senior injured himself due to his own lack of skill. Yahello laughed casually, trying to reassure his friend that it was nothing more than a scratch. The veteran emphasizes that the mission was a great success because they managed to save the children and recover the diary. He shows the logbook, happily stating that their first official job was very successful. Yahello smiled thoughtfully, realizing that classifying the mission simply as victorious would be too simplistic. He recalls the incredible ease with which the protagonist faced and overcame the powerful martial art. He thinks about how the boy single-handedly defeated the entire gang and easily subdued the cult's elite guard. The elder admires the boy's unwavering integrity and his sincere concern for protecting the defenseless civilians in the village. He is amazed by Namgung's impressive swordsmanship, which manages to overcome any difference in skill level. He concludes that the protagonist's talent is too extraordinary to confine him to the limitations of the group. The hunter then decides to put all his effort and care into writing the official mission report. Back at the sect's gates, the two companions stop in their tracks upon seeing the entrance to the large pavilion. Yahello bids him a friendly farewell, explaining that he needs to deliver the documents and asks the hero to rest. The sect's imposing temple rises from the clouds, displaying all its grandeur atop the mountain. Namgung is startled to hear his own name being called out loud by someone he doesn't know. He turns around quickly and feels an overwhelming pressure coming from that mysterious man in front of him. The imposing warrior asks the young man to relax and formally introduces himself as Kangok, the master of the hall. The young swordsman's eyes widened as he recognized the dreaded cult-destroying hall he had heard so much about. He quickly adopts a very respectful posture and makes a formal bow to the powerful master who has appeared. This division is famous for its extreme destructive force, capable of breaking through enemy lines in large battles. They are the feared vanguard warriors who always lead the sect's most dangerous and bloody attacks. It all begins when we recall the legendary battles of the sect-crushing hall led by Kangok. He is known throughout the martial arts world as a formidable leader of simply monstrous physical strength. The warrior firmly grips his gigantic double axe, which still drips blood from his battles. Kangok steps firmly onto the courtyard and begins questioning the young hero about his first official mission. He walks with an imposing presence, enveloped in flames, saying that he has heard about the confrontation against the demonic sect. Namgung feels the overwhelming pressure from the leader and calmly confirms that he did indeed confront those enemies. The master asks if he understands why he is the main target of the terrible demonic sect of the sun and moon. Jun realizes he's being deliberately pressured by the master and replies that he knows very well the reason for everything. He remembers that the terrible demonic cult performs bizarre rituals and uses dangerous dark arts. In their past life, they attempted to create a perfect vessel through a terrible, forbidden sacrifice. Knowing this, the boy understands that their real interest now is to capture him at any cost. The reason is that his body is simply perfect for accumulating and manipulating yin and yang energies together. The master questions whether it wouldn't be better for the boy and for the world itself if he remained hidden within the sect. The boy knows that if he were dead, everything would be over, but he doesn't want to simply run away from his responsibility. He reflects that his master has given him a new life and that he must focus on the true essence of martial arts. Kangok laughs loudly and angrily asks if the young man thinks that mere talent will make him the supreme ruler of everything. Jun looks at the ground, remembering past tragedies, and vows to keep his sword steady and straight. The powerful leader observes him with disdain, wondering if it's just the arrogance of some prodigy. He warns that Jun will be hunted down by the cult until he dies and challenges him to prove he has the strength to withstand this fury. The warrior draws his heavy weapon and orders the boy, in a challenging tone, to show him his true power. Kangok leaps spectacularly with his battle axe, while Jun draws his sword without hesitation for a second. The two weapons collide in mid-air, generating a violent bang that scatters sparks of pure energy across the courtyard. The stern-faced master stares closely at the young hero, quite impressed by his blocking technique. Jun keeps his gaze extremely focused, knowing that the slightest slip in front of that monster could be fatal for him. Kangok notices with intrigue that the boy is not afraid of his energy and has perfectly read the pattern of his attack. He decides to test the hero's potential a little further and raises his axe, letting out a thunderous war cry. The opponent is amazed to see that a recruit who hasn't even reached his peak can anticipate all of his attacks. With a wild grin, he focuses all his power into his arm, preparing an attack with immense destructive energy. Jun realizes that if he tries to directly block that overwhelming force, his sword will shatter instantly. With no other choice, he decides to use the legendary whirlwind sword technique that he mastered in his past incarnation. He positions himself with complete firmness, concentrating his energy flow to execute the maneuver perfectly. The boy uses the principle of energy diversion to redirect the devastating impact of the enemy's axe. A terrifying golden flash engulfs the arena as the two powerful forces clash in a terrifying fashion. The colossal impact is so violent that it makes the roof tiles of the great temple tremble with the enormous shockwave. The surrounding stone structures and statues crack under the tremendous amount of power unleashed in the duel. Jun clenched his teeth, feeling that even using his best defensive technique, he was still being pushed back. He is startled by the absurd amount of accumulated internal energy that Master is able to use in combat. With a tremendous effort, the boy pushes his blade upwards in an attempt to break the pressure. He executes a devastating vertical strike, slicing through the air and releasing a sharp trail of pure light against the ground. The energy cuts deep into the stone courtyard, opening a destructive fissure right in the center of the battlefield. A thick smoke rises through the gap separating the two opponents, showcasing the incredible power of his counterattack. Jun is breathing heavily and wearily as he tries to stabilize his breathing after the terrible effort. Kangok watches him, perplexed, and confesses to himself that everything he has just witnessed makes no sense. He stares at the ground in astonishment and realizes with surprise that his own feet were pushed backward during the duel. Jun recalls that his goal of saving innocent lives with firmness and righteousness remains exactly the same. He remembers all the wronged people who suffer in prison and vows that he will always do what is right. The boy explains to the master that he tried to channel all his justice and bravery into his last sword stroke. Kangok seriously states that many begin this path with a sense of justice but ultimately give up. Even so, Jun smiles inwardly, knowing that his companions from the Blue Sky sect will always be by his side. Hearing the boy's firm reply, the master of the hall couldn't help but smile broadly and with satisfaction. The master, arms crossed, praises the young man for having already found his own martial path at such a young age. He assures that he will respect the young man's choice and also the decision made by the mistress of the Celestial Sword Pavilion. The mighty warrior is once again engulfed in flames and bids farewell by leaping at high speed across the rooftops. Namgung Jun watches his quick start and is quite impressed by his energy transmission technique. The boy reflects that such a level of skill and agility is worthy of a true master of the Peak Kingdom. Before leaving, the man puts his hand in his clothes, commenting that it would be silly to gossip about the boy's whereabouts. He throws a small wooden object to the protagonist and simply tells him firmly to pick it up. Jun manages to grab the small box in midair and stares at it, completely confused, not understanding what's happening. The master explains that it is an excellent elixir for treating any internal injury caused by a heavy blow. The young hero watches the man walk away, silently thinking that he hasn't actually suffered any internal injury. He manages a slight smile at the corner of his mouth, realizing that the master only needed an excuse to give the elixir. With all the politeness in the world, the young man bows respectfully and sincerely thanks them for the gift. Elsewhere, the experienced leader reads the mission report and wonders if he should have given the boy an elixir as well. He and the senior discuss how it would be a terrible waste to keep the young hero's abilities a secret. The old man, with the long white beard, scratches his chin his gaze deeply analytical and thoughtful, reflecting on the future of the sect. He breaks into a beautiful, satisfied smile and mentally concludes that the protagonist definitely did not disappoint him. The impressive account of Jun's exploits spreads rapidly, generating many comments among everyone in the pavilion. The other disciples begin to whisper suspiciously, unable to believe that the newcomer has already reached such a high level. The brown-haired senior sits with his sword, reflecting that the boy's talent truly belies his young age. He finds it hard to believe that someone who has been training for less than a month could have been so successful in their mission. He stands up and firmly orders the others to stop gossiping and focus entirely on swinging their swords. The twilight, with its orange hues, envelops all the rooftops of the great and peaceful mountain temple. Alone in his chambers, Jun meditates deeply, releasing a strong, brilliant energy around his entire body. He focuses on his breathing to try and reduce the constant seizures that keep disrupting his daily training. He opens his robes and laments that the terrible problem of his ruptured meridians still takes a heavy toll on his body. The protagonist recalls that in his past life, standard physical training was enough to strengthen him. However, his current condition is hindering his growth, and he needs a new, suitable training method. The young man hears a knock and calmly and politely allows the person to enter his room. Master Seha enters the room holding a stack of books and affectionately asks if he has finished his meditation. He greets her respectfully, thanking her for her protection, and she jokingly says that his progress makes her very happy. Jun points confusedly at the volumes in her arms and asks what all those mysterious books could be. She explains that she brought several outdoor training manuals and medical books that will be extremely useful for his health. The hero is surprised and grateful to notice that his master has perfectly identified his current physical condition. Seha smiles, assuring him that he has read all the works while he was away, and promises to teach his disciple every detail. The young man's expression turns peaceful, and he wholeheartedly thanks his beloved teacher for all her constant support. Even so, she lightly taps the hilt of her sword, reminding them that their main priority should still be the blade. The boy enthusiastically agrees, and she cheerfully invites him to go straight to the training courtyard of the pavilion. The two position themselves in the center of the large circular arena, decorated with the sacred symbol of yin and yang under the cloud. The teacher brandishes her weapon and asks the boy to demonstrate his famous technique of the 13 swift lightning bolts. Jun channels his electrical energy into the blade, remembering that this powerful fencing technique was created by himself. He advances against the master, knowing that crossing swords with her will help him unlock the deepest secrets of the art. The two swords begin to clash in a frenetic rhythm, filling the air with the metallic sound of rapid blows. Seha moves with extraordinary grace, gliding across the courtyard while wielding her weapon with complete mastery and ease. The young swordsman watches her movements, fascinated, noticing how the sword's trajectory traces elegant curves. Even though her defense seems slow, it manages to perfectly block each of the boy's 13 rapid electric attacks. The skilled young woman performs spectacular acrobatic feats, dodging energy sparks without losing her focus on the fight. His smooth, calculated cuts completely dominate the surrounding space, giving no chance to the novice. They continue exchanging intense blows in the courtyard, demonstrating a formidable synergy between master and disciple in combat. The young man realizes that her strikes perfectly represent the true essence of heavy and precise fencing. She spins in the air and unleashes a magnificent circular strike, enveloping the courtyard with a beautiful, brilliant stream of pure energy. Master Seha continues her spectacular spinning blade attack, filling the entire arena with blue sparks of energy. Namgung Jun maintains a firm defensive stance, concentrating an immense amount of energy in his own hands. He wonders to himself if his art of true thunder will work well in conjunction with the master's heavy swordsmanship. The two clash again, and the young hero realizes that heavy fencing is precisely for controlling the flow of combat. He notes that the gentle sword technique seamlessly connects the beginning and end of each of the blows delivered in the courtyard. With just a slight and precise wrist movement, the master can easily redirect the opponent's attacks. By crossing her blade very close to the boy's face, she completely blocks the hero's entire attack trajectory. The young man gazes at her with deep admiration, concluding that she is truly worthy of leading the pavilion of the celestial sword. Jun steps back and gives a formal bow, thanking them wholeheartedly for that excellent combat lesson in the arena. Quite intrigued by the great display of power, He asks his teacher what the official name of that technique is. She sheathes her weapon beneath the reddened twilight sky, revealing that it is the posture of the distant cloud wall. This is an advanced technique whose secret manuals are kept in the self-reflection pavilion of the Great Sect. This form of combat is extremely complex and classified as being taught only by warriors of the four clouds. The hero clenches his teeth with great determination, believing that all that effort will be worth it in the end. He clenches his fist tightly, vowing to himself that he will master that complex swordsmanship and make that power his own weapon. With a sharp and determined look, the boy boldly asks if he can try to execute the movements of that technique now. Other disciples watch in astonishment from afar, commenting that witnessing a duel between the recruit and the master is a rare learning experience. They gather eagerly in the stands, vowing not to miss such an unusual spectacle inside the temple for anything. Jun repositions himself, gripping the hilt of his sword firmly, and takes a deep breath to focus his mind entirely on the duel. The young man assumes an imposing stance to begin simulating the spectacular defensive technique he has just witnessed. The teacher is perplexed to notice that the student is imitating the initial posture without even having read the technique manual. Without hesitation, the boy delivers a precise sword strike, moving his body with extraordinary agility across the courtyard. He executes a perfect curved block, releasing a brilliant blue aura that astonishes everyone watching the duel. Seha realizes that although the movement appears slow, it flawlessly deflects the force of the attack, showing that it is not an imitation. To test the limits of the young talent, she leaps forward, launching a swift charge against the hero in the arena. A powerful energy impact occurs in the air as the two blades collide with extreme precision in the center of the circular arena. She is even more impressed by the fact that he manages to perform the complex movement without ever having opened the secret manual. The young man demonstrates brilliant tactical intelligence and an aptitude that surpasses any common expectation of veterans. He perfectly captures all the fundamental concepts of that advanced distant cloud wall technique. Jun moves with speed, delivering precise blows in an attempt to break through the flawless guard of her skilled opponent. The two warriors appear to dance across the training yard, unleashing an incredible sequence of attacks and counterattacks. They clash blades at close range with confident smiles on their faces, clearly enjoying the duel immensely. Through that intense exchange of blows, the boy manages to absorb and understand the secrets of his master's fencing. Jun is quite tired, but breaks into a wide smile of pure satisfaction as he notices his own progress in the courtyard. He understands that she is deliberately making the fight easier to help him learn the technique on his own. Seha smiles gently and proudly, noticing the astonishing speed with which his beloved disciple learns the techniques. The boy mentally thanks his teacher for the opportunity to train with such a kind and extremely dedicated instructor. The two exchange another simultaneous blow, creating a beautiful clash of swords that looks like a painting in India ink. The witnesses are astonished, commenting that Jun's ability to keep up with her master's pace is supernatural. Seha notices the disciple's fatigue and reflects that despite his wonderful dedication, the boy has physical limitations. She notices the hero's legs beginning to tremble and concludes that his weakened body has reached its breaking point. The young mistress steps in front of the boy, holding her own sword, and affectionately announces that the training is over. She praises the excellent martial duel they had and asks him to carefully remember each of the lessons he received today. The boy bows respectfully and looks determinedly at his teacher with yet another request in mind. Jun completely surprises her by boldly asking her to demonstrate her famous swift sword technique as well. He thinks that simply mastering heavy and soft fencing isn't enough, and that he needs to learn quick sword fighting as well. The young man states with complete confidence that he knows very well that the swift sword technique is her true specialty. Seha hesitates for a brief moment, showing surprise and shyness at the immense determination of her young pupil. She smiles confidently and draws her weapon, saying that she trusts his consideration and that she will let him experience the art. The teacher's determined gaze gleams intensely, indicating that she is ready to begin the ultimate speed test. Master Seha unleashes an extremely fast attack, slicing through the air with a precision that leaves the boy completely on high alert. Namgung Jun realizes with great surprise that the electrical energy of her attacks has become incredibly sharp and dangerous. He makes a tremendous effort to defend himself, noticing with alarm that the speed of his attack is on another level. The boy clenched his teeth, feeling as if his own hand which was holding the sword, was about to explode from the force of the attack. She interrupts the attacks with a smile and comments that this would be the first sword technique she would teach him in the sect. This is the powerful Yang Thunder Celestial Sword technique that envelops the entire area with cuts of pure blue energy. The disciples watching the duel cough from the dust and admit in astonishment that they can barely see that speed. A massive spiral of smoke and wind forms around the courtyard, revealing the colossal force generated by the sword duel. Jun tries to catch his breath, excitedly thinking that with a mentor like that, he will soon overcome the limitations of his past life. The protagonist smiles happily, realizing that his own 13 lightning bolts technique will evolve in a simply incredible way. He gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, feeling that thanks to her teachings, his path ahead had become much clearer. With profound respect, the young man bows before his beloved teacher and thanks her wholeheartedly for everything he has learned today. The day begins to draw to a close, casting a reddish hue over the beautiful and peaceful circular arena of the pavilion in the hills. Sitting on the stairs, Jun rests, exhausted, thinking that his weakened body urgently needs a good physical workout. At that moment, Senior Gong Junam approaches, walking calmly, and calls out to the young hero who is resting in the courtyard. He asks if Jun is all right and advises the newcomer, saying that he urgently needs training focused on outdoor martial arts. The boy looks at his own hands, still trembling with fatigue, and agrees that he needs to find a good method of physical training. Smiling amicably, the senior suggests that the protagonist pay a special visit to the sect's famous Iron Tower Hall. Jun becomes quite curious about the description and asks his companion what kind of place this Iron Tower Hall is. Gong sits down next to him and playfully warns that the boy will understand everything perfectly as soon as he sets foot there. The senior explains, laughing, that particular place is where men most obsessed with physical strength and bodybuilding gather. He assures that if the boy seeks out the master of that hall, he will certainly receive all the help he needs to train. Jun decides to go to the location and is impressed to see gigantic warriors lifting heavy iron weights in the courtyard. The young man notices attentively that the members there seem to focus much more on their individual training than on group session. The first 3 training halls are widely regarded as the most powerful in the entire fencing department. Furthermore, the Iron Tower Hall is famous for possessing the strongest and most destructive external techniques among them all, as Jun walks thoughtfully, promising that his own pavilion will soon reach the top. Someone suddenly shouts his name. A gigantic, mustachioed, and very muscular man appears in front of the young man, cheerfully asking what brings him to his salon. The young protagonist looks up completely surprised and innocently asks if the master really knows who he is. The mustachioed giant lets out a thunderous laugh, saying that it's impossible not to know the most famous newcomer in the entire sect. The other bodybuilders who are training start gossiping, commenting that he's the prodigy who defeated the guard on the first mission. The imposing master points his enormous index finger towards the protagonist with a very serious and focused expression. The muscular hall leader puffs out his chest and asks with a mysterious smile if the boy happens to know him as well.